For ECI 162, taught by Professor Carrie Watkins during fall quarter 2025, our group is doing a complete street redesign of E Street. Our group consists of Magic Dober, Heidi Lowe, Marta Bleemeister, and Caitlin Toe. Our presentation will include the current paving conditions, paving context, the intersections we found to be most dangerous, as well as our redesign changes, and how it fits into our envisioned future for E Street, followed by the cross-section redesigns. The current E Street is a mile-long corridor with 6 intersections and 2 major collector segments. E Street has a mix of residential homes and businesses. The corridor is a 2-lane road with angled parking on the transition between residential and business areas. The corridor is a share prioritizing cars as there are no marked bike lanes, there are no bus routes, and 3 of the 6 intersections have a history of crashes. This is what the residential parts of E Street look like, with 2 lanes for driving, street parking on both sides, and narrow sidewalks measured at about 5 feet. This is what the residential to commercial transition street looks like, with 2 lanes for driving, a normal parking lane, and an angled parking lane. The sidewalks are wider to accommodate additional foot traffic but still prioritizes cars. Not shown in this segment are the 2 parking lots, one on each side of the street. This is what the commercial segments of E Street look like, with 2 driving lanes, street parking on both sides, and larger sidewalks to accommodate more people. Businesses in this area include coffee shops, restaurants, bars, retailers, and more. Not shown on this image is another parking lot. There are 2 segments of E Street that currently have a moratorium in place. These are the segments from 7th Street to 6th Street and from 6th Street to 5th Street in the residential areas. A moratorium is a policy put in place after a road has been repaved or reconstructed. A moratorium prevents other agencies from doing work on the street without express permission from the city engineer. A road that's been repaved with the sealant or just had the asphalt replaced has a moratorium of 2 years, while a complete reconstruction has a moratorium of 5 years. The 2 segments of East Street have a moratorium of 5 years, meaning they were completely reconstructed in 2021. One of the ways engineers will decide when a road needs reconstruction or work is through PCI scores or the Paving Condition Index. What happens is a third party will come to the city and drive around where a machine will do some math involving the length of the street and how bumpy the drive was. PCI scores are placed into categories where 70 to 100 points is good and not in need of current work, 50 to 69 points is fair and should be placed in a project for future work, and 0 to 49 points are fair and failed, meaning this road is in really bad condition and should have had work done already. You'll notice in the table, most of the East Street's PCI scores are in the red, meaning repave ASAP, but there are a few reasons why a city may make the decision to hold off on paving. The areas of East Street that are in the red are collector streets, meaning they're busy and have lots of businesses on them. The city must deliver a 30-day notice about road closure, making business owners unhappy and flood the city with complaints. Additionally, this is one of the busiest streets in Davis. Closing the streets for work will flood other streets with traffic, disturb residents, inconvenience pedestrians, and close businesses. Streets like E Street are usually avoided by the city until absolutely necessary to make the aforementioned parties happy. These scores are still very low, and I would expect segments like these to be placed in a future paving project. Something unique about Davis is that a large amount of residents will leave the city for winter and summer break. These are prime time to get infrastructure work done to minimize complaints. You'll notice on campus the school planned to get all their building upgrades done over the summer. This table shows the budget the City of Davis currently has for maintaining streets and bike paths. They're currently at $72.3 million over 10 years for street maintenance and an average PCI score of 62. The ideal budget to increase PCI score average is $98.8 million over 10 years. While this may seem like a lot, infrastructure improvements are very expensive. Like in a redesign, we estimate $3 million. The new features are pricey, but will be safer and encourage. Let's look at some problems that the current E Street design has. For pedestrians, there's currently high traffic with unmaintained foliage and narrow damaged sidewalks.
Here's a table that summarizes the key data for the collisions on E Street from the past 10 years. We can see from the highlighted area that most of the collisions occurred on 5th Street and E Street, which indicates that this is a very unsafe intersection. While there is no data for people killed, there are multiple cases of injuries from the crashes. Furthermore, the collisions are primarily due to automobiles having the right-of-way and drivers going at unsafe speeds. From the data, we created a collision density map of all the injuries on E Street. We can see clearly that the area with the greatest number of injuries is on 5th Street and E Street, and the rest of the injury counts, which are colored in magenta, are kind of spread out across the corridor. Currently, the automobile users are traveling on 2 lanes without a separate turning lane, must park at an angle in certain segments of the road, are driving at a speed limit of 25 miles per hour, And with no roundabouts, the intersections have 28 contact points. Cyclists are currently forced to ride with no dedicated lane and no barriers or even painted lines to protect them. Drivers can also bump into bikers when backing out from the angled parking, since this makes it harder for them to see their surroundings. And under these conditions, we found that the level of traffic stress is 4 and bike level of service is C. For pedestrians, this corridor is a great place to walk. The crosswalks have a 6% slope and tactile pads for people to stand on. However, there are some problems with the sidewalks, such as cracking, too much plant growth, uneven leveling, and challenges for wheelchair users to get across the area with a sloped sidewalk. Although there are no bus lines on East Street itself, there are buses available on 1st, 2nd, and 5th Street, which are intersecting East Street.
With our roadway redesign, we want to improve safety, accessibility, and comfort for all users, meaning pedestrians of all abilities, cyclists, transit users, and motorists. We want to introduce protected bike lanes and enhance pedestrian space, reconfigure on-street parking, and improve multimodal balance. Unfortunately, limited right-of-way prevented widening our sidewalks to the extent that we had envisioned. We removed parking space to make more space for bicyclists, which unfortunately limits ease to shop on East Street. Additional parking space could be added to increase car parking. Our design doesn't only meet, but rather exceeds major ADA, NACTO, and AASHTO guidelines. Our final design consists of protected bike lanes that meet NACTO and AASHTO guidance when properly buffered, travel lanes between 10 and 12 feet, that are ideal for safety and speed management, as well as a widened sidewalk of 6 feet, which meets ADA and NACTO preference. Our 6% ramp slopes are less than ADA maximum slope, and our tactile warning pads, as well as curb extensions, meet turning radii and are supported by NACTO. We envision a safer road for autos and trucks by decreasing conflict points between motorized vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. By replacing the angled parking with parallel parking only, car drivers will be able to see cyclists and pedestrians when pulling out of their parking spot. More so, our redesign reduces the travel speed to 25 miles per hour, which will match design speed by narrowing the lanes to 10 feet and introducing vertical elements, such as street trees. This will reduce crash severity and risk. As mentioned earlier, cyclists are currently the least accommodated for in our corridor. We want to introduce protected bike lanes for both directions of travel to protect cyclists from collisions with both cars and pedestrians. Installing bike parking immediately next to the bike lane on the same level of the street ensures that bicyclists do not have to impede on pedestrian space. By improving safe biking infrastructure, East Street can then tie into the wider Davis cycling network. For pedestrians, we want to widen the sidewalk, allowing higher density of pedestrian traffic and an increased ADA accessibility. Making East Street accessible for users of all abilities also includes fixing the concrete cracks and unevenness currently present on the sidewalks, as well as reducing the street cross slopes. We want to raise all pedestrian sidewalks, as well as install pedestrian islands and curb extensions in intersections to slow down vehicle traffic, as well as minimize the conflict points between pedestrians, cyclists, and cars.
This is the future vision for E Street, using a complete street approach, with plenty of lighting for your safety, wider sidewalks so a wheelchair and a person can fit at the same time, a turn lane for each direction, and bike lanes with either vertical bollards or barriers to separate the autos. Using 3D modeling, we redesigned the cross-section to include dedicated bike lanes with plastic or concrete barriers between the autos and the bikes, reducing LTS from 4 to 2. Removed angle parking and installed parallel parking. The bike lane was placed on the passenger side of the parallel parking, which will reduce dooring. When traveling 10 miles an hour on your bike and someone opens a door, you have very few options. Dooring happens less on the passenger side. A road diet from 15 feet to 11 feet will reduce velocity and help limit impacts to pedestrians. The speed limit stays 25 miles an hour, with added vertical and horizontal elements to reduce velocity and increase safety. These small changes will make every biker feel more comfortable and every pedestrian.
We redesigned a possible vision for East Street's residential zone. Inspired by the European Spielstraße, this road is primarily designed for cyclists, playing kids, and pedestrians. This gives kids back a common space where they can play safely, while also prioritizing bicyclists' safety. Cars are only allowed at low speeds and have to yield to other street users, while residents and visitors are able to park in parking lanes. Because of the moratorium currently in place, construction in this area would have to be delayed until after September 2026.
In our minor intersection, 5th Street and E Street, we redesigned to create a safer and more comfortable road. On E Street, we added a 6-foot bike lane, along with parallel parking on the right side of the road and a curb extension on the left side of the road. We also reduced the vehicle lane width down to 12 feet and added a yellow line to separate the lanes. On 5th Street, we added another 6-foot bike lane on both sides of the road, which is protected by a raised barrier with planters. We also added pedestrian islands and adjusted the vehicle lane width to 11 feet. The intersection, which is colored tan with an area of approximately 2,522 square feet, is now raised and stop sign controlled. Finally, we widened the sidewalk from 4 feet to 8 feet and gave 5 feet of space for grass and trees.
This redesign is the 28-point conflict intersection at 1st and E Street. When footprints are a problem, one option would be intersections with traffic lights. This design was made using Street Mix and 3D Streets, with dedicated and protected bike lanes, smaller travel lanes, and parallel parking replacing the angled parking, which improves on the design using complete street modeling and policy. Removing angled parking gives more room for bike lanes and parallel parking, while reducing overall parking space dedicated to autos for temporary parking. The goal is to give bikes a safe, dedicated lane. This image shows the redesign of the major intersection at 1st and E. This intersection has a heavy volume of traffic from every mode, autos, bikes, and pedestrians. The redesign focused on an 8-point conflict roundabout. Using AutoCAD to design the roundabout, we have a single lane 12-foot wide, a raised island planted with landscaping and an art project installed, mountable apron for trucks, and 4 islands to guide motorists into the circle before the yield sign, 4 crosswalks that cross both the bike lanes and travel lanes at a distance of 20 feet from the yield sign, has a dedicated bike lane in the roundabout. Trucks and buses will use mountable curves for the needed radius to make a 180-degree turnaround. When comparing cost and safety of each design option, we would choose a design based on available space, community desire, and cost. For 5th and E, we decided an intersection would work better based on the small available footprint. And for 1st and E, we decided on a roundabout. The cost is significantly less, safety increases with only 8 points of conflict. With 5,000 vehicles a day per leg, we would have level of service B, and the roundabout will be at 44% capacity. In the future, traffic could double, and the roundabout would be at 88% capacity. The cost is cheaper to maintain over a 10-year period as it needs no maintenance on signals and less emergency response vehicles to the intersection.
While East Street is a vibrant corridor for both its residents and businesses, it is also vulnerable to collisions and prioritizes automobiles over pedestrians and cyclists. Therefore, it must be redesigned to adapt to the changing transportation infrastructure and uphold the safety of pedestrians and cyclists. To apply these changes, however, we must consider how much is in the city's budget and its moratorium policy. But after redesign, we believe that East Street can transform into a safe and thriving place in the future of transportation.